Welcome everyone to the Ronnie Perez podcast. Today we present the basics of Buddhism for the American Military University. Enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome to the Ronnie Perez podcast, the basics of Buddhism, the American Military University. Thanks so much for joining me. I know it's been a while since our last podcast, but I really appreciate you guys tuning in. So, the basics of Buddhism. Let's start off with a really quick map here. From this map here of Asia, we can see that Buddhism started there near Nepal, northern India, around the year 400 BCE. Alright, there you have the map of India and where kind of Buddhism started. Now the consensus is still out whether Buddhism really is a religion, a way of life, a movement, a philosophy. Some people do it religiously. Some people say that because it has a god or a creator, it has to be a religion. But Buddha did not believe so. He believed that it was a way of life, a way of changing your life for the better, and a way of achieving nirvana or enlightenment by renouncing the desires of the flesh, right? So pretty much there is no central god in Buddhism, but Buddha is a central figure. He wasn't always called the Buddha. He was called something else, and we'll get into that here shortly. Now there is no one way in Buddhism. When we get to knowing more about the young man who will become Buddha, we're going to find out that he had different schools that he went with, different teachers and philosophers that tried to help him reach enlightenment, but he ended up not being able to. Also, the goal of Buddhism is to seek to achieve nirvana, which is a state of oneness with the universe. That is kind of the goal, the central tenet of Buddhism. Now, Buddhism has about 950 million followers worldwide. That's about 14% of the world's population, and that's a lot of people. So, Buddhism has been around for a long time, one of the oldest religions. Also, it has a lot of followers globally. Okay? Now, when we go through this, we're going to go through using examples from a book called Understanding the Religions of the World by Mr. Wallaby Deming. This is a textbook style reference that goes through a lot of the major religions of different faiths of the world, and we're going to be citing him whenever we talk about Buddhism. That way we know it's not just my opinions, it's the actual opinions of an educated scholar. The history of Buddha. Now here, before he was known as Buddha, he was known as Siddhartha Gautama, who was a prince in Nepal. At this time in India, there was some tribal living, right? Every kind of section of India, different regions had different tribes, and these people governed over their areas, sometimes answering to a central government when that existed, sometimes just living in their own little regions and governing themselves. So India was a very big place before the conquest by the Arabs, and before they took over, these Indians in India were the ones that governed. Okay, so he was a prince in Nepal, part of the wealthy noble class, and he was pretty well off. He was married with a child, some sources say, and he was showered with luxury and riches. He never knew poverty, or he never knew pain. He never knew what it was to be hungry or to be destitute. He was always showered by wealth and riches. So as a young man, he was very fortunate and did not suffer, didn't have pain, anything like that. So what happens? What makes this giant change in the life of Mr. Who would now become known as Buddha? Well, what happens was that he took a trip. During this trip, him and his charioteer, we call him driver in modern terms, took him to different places. And during that, he was able to see 4 sites, and these sites were critical to his transformation and his change of mindset. So the first thing he sees is an old man. He doesn't know what this is because he's never seen kind of aging, the stories say. And the charioteer, the driver, tells him, hey, man, this is an old guy. So it's going to happen to everyone. Everyone gets old. He's very pained by this, the future Buddha is. He also sees a sick man. And he says, man, what is that? And the charioteer tells him, this is a sick guy. You know, that happens to everyone. We all get sick. And that also pained him. He saw a dead man. And he'd never known death. He'd never known what it was for someone to die. And the charioteer again tells him that's what happens to every man. Now, the fourth side he sees is what's called an ascetic man. An ascetic person in this time is someone who renounces worldly things like food, just the basic substance for food, renounces property, possessions, clothes, materialistic lifestyle. He renounces everything, even the amount of air they breathe in, the amount of sleep they get. Everything is moderated in an effort to achieve enlightenment. They go on these long fasts, very weak, frail bodies because of this. Now, he sees this ascetic man, and he thinks this is the path to enlightenment. This has to be it. Now, this realization that, like anybody else, he could be subject to all this human suffering revolutionized him and drove him into a personal crisis. Now, after he saw these sights, he left his palace. Some sources say in the middle of the night, some sources say he told his parents, but he left. And at this point, he joined the ascetics for 6 years. For 6 years, he starved himself. He moderated what he ate. He moderated all of his kind of lifestyle. Very limited, restricted lifestyle. And as far as what he ate, what he did. And that was to no avail. He never got anywhere as far as his spiritual journey. Which means that, because of this, he was not able to find enlightenment. So after 6 years of doing that, he goes off, he takes a meal, a big meal, he takes a bath, which was also very restricted, and he sat down under a tree, Ficus religiosa, right? A fake tree in some places, just a regular tree in some places, but a tree, where he finally, after sitting and meditating, achieves nirvana. This realization of the perfect enlightenment is what made him be called the Buddha, right? So during this time, he understands kind of the path to enlightenment. One principle of the Buddha that he held was the principle of dukkha, or pain. Now it means that pain, discomfort, and disappointment are all associated with life. This principle that life brings pain. It's part of life, okay? And the main reason is because pleasure and happiness, no matter how great, will always be fleeting. It's always temporary. Nothing is forever. Because of this, even if I have a happy lifestyle, even if I have joy from my daughter or whatever, that emotion is fleeting. It's never going to be forever, which means that will cause me pain. Life brings pain. Nothing is lasting, meaningful, or stable. Now, we go next into desire. Number 2, desire, or what he calls trishna. Now, this can be defined as a thirst or desire for materialistic things. Now, this leads to attachment, another key word here, attachment, which can lead to disappointment, as we mentioned previously, and then to dukkha, or pain. So the idea is that attachments bring some kind of need, and loss of that will produce pain. Thus, life is always pain and suffering. Now, attachment can be to physical things, to ideas of belief, to my idea of the self, my self-image. All these things are attachments, Deming says, that are caused by desire. Okay, so if you look at this graph here, desire leads to attachment, which again is always temporary, which then leads to the loss of a temporary thing and then back to pain. Thus, the cycle is there. Now, that cycle has to be broken. Now, nirvana is the elimination of desire. Okay? If dukkha is pain, and the result of that pain is desire for more and more and more, and then that causes attachment, then we have to break that cycle of suffering or pain by eliminating desire. Once we eliminate desire for everything, then we don't have any attachments, which means that we can't lose those attachments, which means that we can't have pain. So that's the main idea, the cessation of suffering caused by the chasing of desire and materialism. The end state, where you are devoid of pleasure and attachment, and as a result, devoid of pain and suffering. So the Buddhist, again, is seeking to be devoid of pain and suffering, so he can achieve that enlightenment. But that also means that he has to be devoid of desire and attachment. Okay? So in the modern world, that's kind of hard for us, because for me to produce this podcast here, I have to have certain things. I have a desire to get better. I have a desire to have better equipment, better things like that, a materialistic desire. And according to Buddha, if I pursue this goal, then I cannot really be free of the pain that not having enough followers would bring me, or the pain of losing all of it. That would bring me pain, and therefore I'm stuck in that cycle. Okay, now what does Buddha give us? He gives us the Eightfold Path, or the way. Again, I mentioned there's no just one way. There's several different ways. It's just one way, the Eightfold Path, that Buddha gives us in order for us to achieve, or for a practitioner to achieve enlightenment. You have to overcome the ignorance and be free of earthly desires. Step number 1, understand that the torch will light travelers' way. The torch, the light, will light your way. Okay? Our intentions will be our guide. If we intend to pursue this, let that guide us. Speech will be his dwelling place on the road, to be well spoken. Behavior will be for him as straight as a gate. You must have good behavior. Right livelihood will be his refreshment along the way. You get a renewed strength from living this good life. Right efforts will be your steps. So putting effort forward, you're going to step and step and step until you get to that final goal. Meditation will be his breathing. To meditate, to kind of reflect, to let go of the stress. That's going to be kind of your breathing or your life force, right? And then right contemplation will give him the peace that follows in the Buddha's footsteps. Again, that's self-introspection, that eliminating desire, eliminating pleasure. Those are pretty much the Eightfold Path and the way that Buddha tells us we can get to a state of enlightenment. Moving forward, we can talk about how this relates to suffering and overcoming suffering. How does Buddhism relate to suffering and overcoming suffering? Well, we understand that suffering is caused by pain. Let's look at this chart again. Again, suffering is caused by pain. It's a never-ending cycle, okay, of desire, attachment, loss, and pain. Now, how do we eliminate suffering, okay, and overcome that suffering? It happens by eliminating the desire for attachment, okay? Once we are completely unattached, then we cannot lose anything, we don't need anything, we don't have needs, and those needs can't be met, right? If you don't have a need, that need can't be met, and the loss of that need won't produce more pain. So pretty much, pain comes from needing things. If we don't need anything, we end our suffering. What is the Buddhist answer to end one's suffering? Again, it's going back to the reason for suffering is pain and attachment. Once you eliminate desire, you're not going to have pain or attachment because you're not going to have anything to be sad for. What are Buddhist beliefs about attachment and simplicity? Again, the materialistic world, this capitalist world, this materialistic world is always giving us more and more. Our goal is to eliminate that, eliminate the need for more earthly material things, and then be more attached to ourselves, who we are, okay? And even that, self-attachment can be dangerous because you have to be able to not be attached to anything, even your self-image. If my self-image for 5 years was as a member of the Air Force, right? Once I leave that, I don't have a self-image anymore, I was in the Air Force, so what am I now? So that self-image problem is an attachment I had. So if I eliminate that and not relate in that way to myself and think, okay, well now I am just me and I'm seeking enlightenment, eliminating that attachment will then cause me to get to the state of nirvana. But even personal attachment, attachment to ideas, attachments to beliefs, those attachments are all contradictory to the Buddhist lifestyle. The goal is to live simply, the goal is to live without attachment, the goal is to be free of desire and pain. Now, in our 21st century world, that is hard because we live in homes. We like to have our comforts. We enjoy air conditioning and a big meal and these things. So maybe living 100% purely as a Buddhist is difficult, which is why in China and India and places like that, their numbers have dwindled in real, honest practitioners that are dedicated to the lifestyle. Because our modern world gives all this materialistic, ease, it's hard to tell someone, hey, give up your phone, give up your house, give up all your comforts to be a Buddhist and live the life truly seeking enlightenment. So again, to reach the end goal, you must give everything away, all your attachment, to be free of suffering and pain. So being a 100% practitioner in America or in these modern countries is very difficult. Again, the strive is to live simply and live without pain, attachment, or desire. That is the basics of Buddhism. A very old religion, has a lot of good things that we can put into our lives today. Maybe eliminating some of the commercialism, eliminating some of the need for materialism. Those ideas are very strong to me. Kind of eliminating a lot of that advertisement and commercialism and consumerism. But when it comes to living it fully, it is difficult here in the modern age. Thanks, guys, for joining me on this Basics of Buddhism course for the American Military University. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and we'll have more stuff coming up soon. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us here in the Ronnie Perez podcast, which presented the Basics of Buddhism for the American Military University. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Like and subscribe. Hope to see you soon.